Welcome to Pillowtime lore, my dear ones. Tell me, how was your day? Was it heavy on your shoulders? Or did it slip by so quickly that you barely had a moment to breathe? Maybe there were things you wanted to say but couldn't, or dreams you quietly carried in your heart. Tonight, let all of that rest. Tonight, you don't need to be strong or brave or busy. You only need to be here, with me, safe and still, as the night wraps around you like a soft, familiar blanket. Do you remember when stories felt like magic? When a single whisper could turn an ordinary room into a forest full of secrets? Or when the creak of the floorboards became the footsteps of a hidden traveler on a great adventure? Close your eyes and let yourself return to that wonder, even just for a while. Here at Pillowtime Lore, every story has a key tucked inside it, a key to a place you thought you'd lost. Maybe it's the laughter of childhood, the calm of a warm embrace, or the courage to believe in something beautiful again. So, tell me, what do you need tonight? A tale to make you smile, a mystery to chase through the dark, or perhaps a story that feels like someone holding your hand, telling you it's okay. You're not alone. Take a deep breath, dear one. Sink into your pillow. Let the weight of the day slip away, and follow me into a world where dreams wander free and every story feels like it was made just for you. Welcome to Pillowtime Lore, where each night begins with a whisper, and every ending feels like coming home. Ah, gather round, child. Let me tell you about a house that has seen more winters than most men live to count. A place where the walls have listened to whispers that never reached the light of day. Families like the Varons, you see, they carry their names like crowns, polished on the outside but tarnished beneath. Every smile hides a shadow, every laugh a secret, and sometimes those secrets grow so heavy they begin to seep into the very stones of the house itself. This story begins not with thunder or fire, but with silence. The kind of silence that makes you hold your breath without knowing why. The kind that feels alive. There's a girl here, Arya, a young woman with a sharp mind and a hunger for truth. She isn't like the ones who walk past strange happenings and tell themselves it's nothing. No, she has the sort of spirit that runs toward the storm instead of away from it, and that's both her strength and her curse. Then there's Elias, the boy everyone thought was gone, the one whose absence left cracks in the family's perfect picture. Sometimes it's not the dead who haunt us, but the missing, because their stories remain unfinished, like a sentence left hanging in the air. And those unfinished stories can make men do terrible things. And of course, you'll meet Damien with his easy smile and careful words, the kind of man who speaks like honey, but whose footsteps are quiet enough to make you wonder where he's been. And Lord Victor, old and proud, carrying the weight of his legacy like a coat too heavy for his shoulders. And Margaret, whose fear clings to her like perfume. Ah, but don't expect to find comfort here. For in this tale, truth is not a gentle thing. It is a blade, sharp and cold. And those who seek it often come away with scars. Listen closely now. For every creak of the floorboards and every flicker of the candlelight means something. And sometimes, what you don't see is far more dangerous than what you do. The story is waiting for you, child, and once you step inside, there's no turning back. The rain poured down in relentless sheets, turning the city streets into shimmering rivers of silver. each droplet striking the window of Arya's small apartment with a rhythm that matched the pounding of her heart. She sat hunched over her worn wooden desk, the glow of her laptop screen casting tired shadows across her face. She had been struggling for months to make a name for herself as an investigative journalist, writing for a magazine that barely remembered her name, the kind of work that paid just enough to survive, but never enough to dream. Sometimes she wondered if her efforts were worth it, if chasing stories that never truly mattered was what she was meant to do. Yet deep inside, she had always believed that one day a story would come along that would change everything. That truth had a way of finding those who sought it. A soft, unexpected thud at the door snapped her from her thoughts. Her breath caught as she looked up. A single envelope lay there, edges soaked by the rain. Her name written in elegant, swirling handwriting, the kind of script that seemed almost from another era. She hesitated before picking it up, a strange heaviness filling the air, the type that comes right before a storm. Carefully, she tore it open and read the message within, her hands trembling ever so slightly. Solve the mystery of Elias Veron, and you shall be rewarded beyond measure, the letter read. The name Elias Veron sparked recognition instantly, the missing heir to one of the most powerful and secretive families in the country. His disappearance on his 18th birthday had baffled the public for 20 long years. Some said he ran away to escape his family's grip. Others whispered of murder, betrayal, and family curses. The letter was signed only as a friend of the truth. No clue to who had sent it. No clear motive. Only a challenge that seemed to speak directly to her restless soul. Arya felt fear rise in her chest, but beneath it was something stronger. An unshakable pull toward the unknown. She thought of how fleeting life was, how opportunities passed like trains in the night, and how regret often came not from failure, but from never trying at all. With resolve tightening her grip, she packed a small bag, sliding in her notebook, recorder, and flashlight, essentials for a journey she could not fully predict. The rain greeted her with icy fingers as she rushed through the streets to the station. As the train pulled away into misty hills and shadowed forests, she felt the faintest sensation of being watched. Fleeting glimpses in the corner of her eye, a weight pressing at her spine. But when she turned, there was nothing there, only the darkened window reflecting her own determined face, and the endless rhythm of wheels carrying her toward a story that would test every ounce of courage she had left. A story of power, lies, and truth buried deep in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. Arya stepped out of the carriage and onto the gravel driveway, her boots crunching against the wet stones. The Veron estate rose before her like a relic from another time. A vast mansion built of dark stone, its walls swallowed by twisting ivy, surrounded by forests so thick they seemed to breathe shadows. The sunlight struggled to pierce through the canopy, leaving the world in a perpetual dusk. The air smelled of wet earth and old secrets, as if the land itself had been holding its breath for years. When the iron gates closed behind her with a groan, it felt less like a welcome and more like a warning. She knew in that moment that once she stepped inside, there would be no easy escape inside. The grand hall was dimly lit, flickering candlesticks, restless shadows on the portraits of the ancestors that lined the walls. Their painted eyes seemed alive, watching her every move, judging her presence. She was led to the drawing room where the family awaited. Lord Victor, the patriarch, stood tall and unyielding, his sharp gaze cutting through the air like a blade. Aunt Margaret sat rigid and silent, bitterness etched deep into her face, while Damien, the cousin, smiled with a warmth that felt carefully practiced. Like a mask hiding something darker beneath, their greetings were hollow, their words polite but laced with unspoken hostility. Each syllable seemed to whisper, "You do not belong here." Arya's chest tightened as she realized that this was a place where truths were buried beneath layers of lies. She noticed the way the staff moved like ghosts, never meeting her gaze for long. Their whispers were soft but heavy with fear. They spoke of Elias, the missing heir, calling him the cursed son of the house, a boy swallowed by darkness, his name a dangerous thing to utter. She could see the dread in their eyes whenever his story surfaced, as if even his memory had power. That night, Arya lay awake in the guest room, the rain whispering against the windows like 1,000 voices. The wind howling through the trees. She thought of her own life, of the years she had spent chasing stories that never mattered, of the loneliness that had become her silent companion. Sometimes she believed she was more of a ghost than the people she wrote about. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps outside her locked door. Slow and deliberate, a rhythm that made her skin crawl. They stopped, then began again, closer this time. Arya's breath caught in her throat, and in that chilling silence, she understood one thing with absolute certainty. The house was alive, and it had been waiting for her. The morning sun barely managed to pierce the heavy clouds, casting the drawing room in a pale, cold light. Arya sat with her notebook balanced on her knee, her pen poised like a weapon, ready to capture every detail. The family sat opposite her, their faces masks of controlled expression, their words precise, rehearsed, dripping with the weight of decades-old lies. Lord Victor's voice was stern and unyielding as he insisted Elias had simply run away after a trivial argument, as if a boy would abandon his entire world over something so small. Aunt Margaret spoke next, her tone clipped and bitter, claiming Elias had always been lost in strange ideas and wild conspiracies, painting him as unstable, a problem best forgotten. Then there was Damien, his smile charming, his voice soft, telling Arya he had always tried to keep Elias calm, his words carefully chosen, his eyes betraying nothing. Their stories tangled together like threads of a spider's web, contradicting and clashing, leaving Arya with a knot of suspicion tightening in her chest. She realized in that moment how families could build entire kingdoms of silence, protecting truths they would rather see rot than be revealed. It reminded her of her own past, of the secrets she had grown up around, the way people would rather whisper lies than face pain. She understood then that truth is rarely spoken aloud. It is hidden in fragments, in slips of the tongue, in what is left unsaid, and it is a dangerous thing to chase later. As Arya wandered through the endless corridors of the mansion, her footsteps echoing against the ancient stone, a timid housemaid emerged from the shadows, her hands trembling, her eyes darting like a trapped bird. Before Arya could speak, the maid pressed a small brass key into her palm and whispered, "The truth lies where the raven flies," then vanished into the darkness as quickly as she had appeared. The words clung to Arya's mind like a haunting riddle, pulling her to a forgotten attic, heavy with dust and the scent of decay. There, among broken trunks and faded relics, she found Ilias's childhood drawings, pages filled with ravens, one always drawn with a broken wing, strange maps with cryptic markings, symbols that seemed to pulse with meaning. That night, the wind howled like a living thing, rattling the windows. As Arya crept past the library, she froze, peering through the half-open door. Damien knelt by the fireplace, his face illuminated by firelight, calm, deliberate, as he fed letters into the flames, each page curling and blackening, each secret devoured by heat. Arya's pulse quickened. She knew now that Ilias's disappearance was no accident, and that the house itself was a stage for a much darker play, one where every move was being watched and every truth came with a price. The morning fog clung to the ground like a living thing, curling around Arya's boots as she stepped carefully onto the narrow path behind the mansion. The trees rose like silent sentinels, their twisted branches clawing at the pale sky, blocking out what little light dared to enter this forgotten corner of the estate. She held Ilias's drawings close to her chest, the fragile paper worn from her grip, each cryptic line and symbol leading her further into the unknown. The marks matched the strange carvings etched into tree trunks and stones, as if someone had built a map only the desperate or the foolish would dare follow. The forest smelled of damp earth and decay, a heavy, ancient scent that clung to her clothes and hair, every sound magnified in the stillness, the snap of a twig, the whisper of wind through the leaves, even the frantic rhythm of her own heartbeat as she walked deeper. She thought of the stories she had heard growing up, about people who chased truths so far they lost themselves, about those who learned that some mysteries are not meant to be solved. She had always believed that truth brought freedom, that uncovering lies would bring light. But now, surrounded by shadows and silence, she began to wonder if some truths were like poison, dangerous to those who drank too deeply. Her steps slowed when she saw it, a carving of a raven with a broken wing on an ancient oak, identical to the ones Elias had drawn over and over. Her pulse quickened as she followed the faint trail of stone markers half buried beneath moss, their symbols like a language only Elias could speak. It felt as though his spirit was walking with her, guiding her, urging her to see what he had seen. She knelt by a cracked stone with initials barely visible beneath grime, running her fingers over the cold surface, a chill traveling up her spine. This was more than a path. It was a story carved into the earth, and she was now a part of it. The stillness shattered with a sharp snap of branches behind her, too heavy to be an animal. Her breath caught as fear surged through her veins. She didn't look back. She ran, branches whipping at her face, her lungs burning. She burst through the last line of trees and stopped dead. Damien stood at the gate, his hands casually tucked into his coat pockets, his expression calm, almost amused, as if he had been waiting for her all along. Arya's chest heaved as realization struck. She had never been alone on this path. Every step had been watched, and the secrets she was chasing were never hers to claim. The evening shadows stretched long across the Veron estate, swallowing the last traces of sunlight as Arya prepared for the most crucial part of her investigation. She knew people were like books, their words revealing only the parts they chose to share, while the real truths hid between the lines. And tonight, she planned to read carefully, starting with Lord Victor, the patriarch, whose presence seemed to fill every corner of the room. He sat rigid in his high-backed chair, posture flawless, his face carved from stone, his voice smooth but heavy with authority. He claimed Elias had grown restless, burdened by the weight of his inheritance and longing to escape that he had left by choice, chasing freedom like a reckless child. But even as he spoke, Arya caught a flicker of something in his eyes, a fleeting crack in his perfect composure, proof that his version of the story was carefully built, not fully true. Next was Aunt Margaret, whose footsteps echoed sharply against the wooden floors as she paced, her hands twisting together as though she were wringing out her own guilt. Her voice trembled between anger and grief as she described Elias as unstable, lost in wild theories and dangerous obsessions. She painted him as someone who saw threats everywhere and could not be trusted. Yet her words felt like shields, hastily built walls to keep something hidden. Arya had seen this before in her work, people using blame to mask their own fears. And Margaret's trembling lips betrayed a fear deeper than the story she was spinning. Finally, there was Damien, who welcomed Arya with a calm, easy smile, leaning back as if this was merely a casual chat. He spoke like a man with nothing to hide, calling himself the peacemaker, the one who soothed Ilias's anger and kept the family united. He was charismatic, disarming even, but charisma was often the most dangerous mask of all. His story was smooth, too smooth, like a river polished by years of repetition. And when Arya compared his words with the others, the cracks appeared, timelines clashing, details shifting like sand, revealing gaps that could not be explained. That night, the house was silent but alive, every creak of the floorboards making Arya's pulse quicken as she searched the grand hall with her flashlight, determination driving her forward. Beneath a loose plank, her fingers brushed cold metal, and she froze, pulling free a cufflink, its once polished surface darkened by dried blood, engraved with the initials DV, Damien Veron. Her breath caught as the weight of it settled on her chest. This was no longer just a mystery of words and suspicion. This was proof, tangible and damning, and it told her that beneath the charming smile and polished lies, Damien was far more dangerous than he appeared. The game had shifted, and Arya knew she was now walking on a knife's edge, every step leading her deeper into a web of deceit where the truth could cost her everything. Arya stormed into Margaret's small sitting room, her boots echoing sharply against the polished wooden floor, the blood-stained cufflink clenched tightly in her fist like a weapon. Her breath came fast, fueled by anger and urgency. Margaret looked up from her chair and froze, the color draining from her face, as if the very sight of the object stole the strength from her body. Her hands trembled as she reached for the edge of the table to steady herself, whispering in a voice so low it was nearly swallowed by the silence. "You shouldn't be here. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. Leave before it's too late." Her eyes flickered with fear, not just for herself, but for Arya, for the secrets that were more dangerous than anyone dared to admit. Arya didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her steady, piercing gaze did all the work, her words firm yet calm as she pressed Margaret. knowing that fear often loosened lips faster than anger ever could. Margaret finally broke, her shoulders sagging under the weight of years of silence. Her voice cracked as she admitted small fragments of the truth, pieces scattered like shards of glass. Elias, she confessed, had always sensed something foul beneath the estate's polished surface. He had been determined to uncover it, his questions sharp, his persistence unshakable. Margaret warned Arya that Elias had been walking a path lined with knives, a path that had cut too deep when he finally learned what he was never meant to know. Some truths, Margaret whispered, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes, are too dangerous to chase, and those who seek them rarely return whole. Her words carried a sorrow that went beyond fear, a kind of resignation that only came from living in a house built on lies, determined not to turn back. Arya retreated to the estate's study, a cold, imposing room lined with dusty ledgers and fading portraits. She sifted through old records, her fingers tracing Ilias's precise handwriting, each mark revealing his fight for justice. The numbers told a story of corruption, smuggling, and fraud that stretched back generations. Elias had uncovered everything, had confronted his grandfather and Damien the night he vanished. The pages before her were evidence, not just of a crime, but of a young man's courage. As she pieced the puzzle together, Arya's pulse quickened, and then, through a barely open door, she saw him, Damien, his face half hidden by shadow, watching her with a calm smirk. His silence louder than any threat, the air thickened, heavy with danger, as if the mansion itself was holding its breath, waiting for the moment the truth would either be revealed or buried forever. Arya stood in the dim light of the wine cellar, her breath visible in the cold air as her flashlight flickered weakly, casting shifting beams against the ancient stone walls. Ilias's map trembled slightly in her hand, worn creases showing how many times he must have studied it before his disappearance. Her eyes followed the faded markings until they landed on a section of the wall that seemed slightly uneven, almost as though it was hiding something beneath its surface. She pressed her palm against the cold stone and felt a subtle give. A slow creak echoed as a hidden door swung open, releasing a breath of stale air that smelled of damp earth and decay. It was like the past itself had been sealed away, waiting for someone brave enough to open it. The tunnel stretched before her, narrow and suffocating, a black vein running beneath the estate. Arya hesitated only for a moment before stepping inside, because turning back had never been an option for her. She had always believed that truth was not something given freely. It was something clawed from the dark at great cost. Her boots crunched softly on the packed dirt as she descended deeper, the sound of dripping water mingling with her own ragged breaths, the weight of the earth above her pressing down, as if the entire mansion was listening as she moved forward. The walls began to change, etched with strange symbols and carvings of ravens. Dozens of them, their wings spread wide, their eyes sharp and knowing. She trailed her fingertips over one particularly deep carving and froze when she saw it. The broken-winged raven, the same image Elias had drawn again and again. This was no random symbol. It was a message, a marker of the path he had taken. She imagined him walking these same steps, alone and afraid, yet determined to uncover the family's secrets. And in that moment, she felt a kinship with him. Two seekers separated by time but united by purpose. Her foot caught on something hard, the metallic clink echoing sharply in the silence. Kneeling, she lifted a small locket, Elias's initials engraved on its tarnished surface, proof that he had been here, proof that his story had not ended the way the family claimed. But before she could process the discovery, a loud slam reverberated through the tunnel. The entrance had sealed shut, plunging her into suffocating darkness. Then came the voice, smooth, cold, dripping with amusement. Damien's voice, cutting through the silence like a blade. Too clever for your own good, aren't you? Arya's chest tightened as fear surged through her veins. She had walked straight into a trap, and in that moment she understood a hard truth, that seeking the light often meant stepping into places where the dark would fight back. The tunnel around her seemed to close in, heavy with secrets and lies, and every heartbeat was a countdown to whatever fate awaited her in the depths of the Varon estate. The darkness of the tunnel pressed around Arya like a living thing, her flashlight trembling in her grip, its weak glow barely pushing back the suffocating blackness. Damien's voice slithered through the air, cold and triumphant, each word echoing off the stone walls like a curse. He stepped closer, and for the first time, the mask he had worn for years slipped away, revealing the predator beneath the polished smile. His confession spilled forth with a chilling calmness. Elias had been on the verge of exposing him for embezzling the family's fortune. Money meant to preserve the Varon legacy, twisted into Damien's personal greed. Elias confronted him on the night of his 18th birthday, a night meant to mark his future. Instead, it became his end. Damien admitted with casual cruelty that during their fight, Elias fell, and he let the world believe he had drowned in the river. Though no body was ever found, Arya's mind spun, fragments of the past clicking into place like shattered glass, forming a jagged image. The missing cufflink Ilias's mother had clung to for years, the burned letters hidden beneath the study floorboards. Every whisper and carefully crafted lie Damien had spun now revealed for what they were. A story to protect his power. She realized Damien's charm had been nothing but a carefully woven disguise. Beneath it lay a hunger that devoured anyone who threatened his control. And now Arya stood in the same position Elias once had, a lone figure armed only with truth against a man who feared it. For a brief moment, fear almost paralyzed her. The weight of generations pressing down, the tunnel itself seemed to close in as if the estate's very walls sided with Damien. Yet beneath that fear rose something far greater, a determination forged from grief and purpose. She thought of Elias, a young man whose dreams had been stolen before they could take shape. She thought of her own years spent buried in silence, following threads no one else dared to touch. This was not only about surviving, it was about breaking the cycle of lies that had chained the family for decades. Damien lunged, a flash of steel catching the faint light. But Arya moved with desperate clarity, swinging her flashlight into his arm, the clang of metal against bone ringing through the tunnel. She grabbed a jagged stone from the wall and struck again, fighting not only for her life but for Elias, for the truth, for the chance to drag the darkness into the light. Each heartbeat became a vow that the secrets of the Varon estate would not be buried any longer. The shadows had fed on silence for too long, and tonight they would starve. Damien pressed Arya against the cold stone wall of the tunnel, his knife glinting in the dim, trembling light, his cruel smile widening as fear thickened the air. Arya's breath caught every instinct in her screaming to run. Yet there was nowhere left to go. The walls closed in like the weight of generations. And for a moment, it seemed as though the darkness itself had chosen Damien to rule over it. Then, from the shadows ahead, a figure emerged, tall and unyielding, the faint glow catching a face that was gaunt and marked by hardship, eyes sharp and burning with purpose. It was Elias, alive, a ghost made flesh, returning to a house that had buried him in lies. Damien froze, his confident smirk faltering, his grip on the knife loosening as confusion clawed at his mind. He had spent years building his throne on Ilias's absence, never expecting the boy he'd betrayed to walk back through the darkness. Arya's heart surged as relief and disbelief crashed over her. The missing heir was no longer a rumor, no longer a symbol of tragedy. He was here, breathing, defiant, and ready to reclaim what had been stolen. Elias spoke quickly, his voice steady, honed by years of silence and survival. He revealed how he had escaped the night Damien struck him, diving into the forest while the world believed he had drowned. In the years since, he had hidden in abandoned corners of the estate, moving like a shadow while collecting proof of Damien's theft and deceit. Every cold night, every near capture had been endured for this moment. He had waited for someone brave enough to follow the clues and bring the truth to light. Arya realized she had been part of that plan without even knowing it. Her investigation had been the spark Elias needed to step out of the shadows. With the precision of two people bound by the same cause, Elias and Arya turned the tide. Damien's knife clattered to the ground as they overpowered him, the struggle fierce but brief. They bound him with rope, scavenged from the tunnel, and dragged him back to the grand hall. Where the family waited, the room fell silent as Elias stepped forward. The heir they had long mourned standing before them, Lord Victor's face drained of color, guilt cutting deep lines into his features as he admitted that he had known pieces of the truth, but kept silent to shield the family name. In that moment, the carefully woven veil of respectability tore apart. The lies that had strangled the estate for years, collapsing under the weight of truth. The room filled with gasps and murmurs, and for the first time in decades, the Varant legacy stood naked before the world, trembling but finally free. The estate stood in silence, its grand halls echoing with the ghosts of confessions and shattered illusions. Damien was led away in handcuffs, his smirk gone, his face pale with the weight of a truth he could no longer twist. The family gathered in the main hall, their once proud postures broken. Lord Victor sat slumped in his chair, a man who had spent a lifetime guarding a crumbling legacy. Margaret stood frozen, clutching her hands as if she could hold the remnants of her world together. The air was thick with grief and relief, the fragile balance between justice and destruction hanging heavy over everyone. Arya watched it all unfold, knowing that the house itself seemed to breathe differently now, as though it too had been freed from the suffocating grip of secrets. Elias turned to Arya, his expression unreadable yet softened by a quiet gratitude. In his hand was an envelope, the promised payment for her work, though it felt far heavier than money alone as he handed it to her. His voice was calm and deliberate. He revealed that he had been the one who sent the first letter, the mysterious friend of the truth who had set everything in motion. He thanked her not only for her determination, but for her courage to stand in the spaces where others turned away. His words carried a warning that the Varon family's secrets ran deeper than anyone could imagine. That beneath the crimes exposed tonight lay older shadows, darker and more dangerous. Some truths, he said, are like knives. They cut differently depending on when they are held. Arya felt the weight of his warning settle in her chest. She realized that solving a mystery did not erase it. It only revealed new layers of darkness. She understood now that truth was never simple, that it was sharp and messy, and sometimes it could destroy more than it saved. Yet she also felt stronger, tempered by the fires she had walked through. She knew she would never see the world in the same way again. Before leaving, Arya pulled the original letter from her bag, the paper worn and damp from her journey. She placed it in the fireplace and watched as the flames consumed it, the smoke curling upward like a final whisper of all that had been hidden. She stepped out into the misty night, the gravel crunching beneath her boots, the trees standing like silent sentinels on either side. When she turned back one last time, Elias stood at the gate, his figure sharp against the fog, above him carved into the stone arch. The raven symbol seemed to shift in the firelight, its wings stretching as if to take flight, a silent reminder that some stories never truly end. They only wait in the shadows for someone brave enough to uncover them.